Welcome, everybody. I am Jana Hexter, and I am based with the Northeast IPM Center. And actually, we have representation from three IPM centers today, the Southern IPM and Mid Central and Northeastern. Um, so I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping and introduction and introduce our speakers. So let me just share my slides. Here we go. There we go. So I want to let you know that there is a transcription available of this webinar, and so you should see that pop up as an option if that's something that you'd like to use. We are recording it. It takes us usually about a week just to do some mild editing and put it up on our website. And here is the link to our website, but you don't need to be concerned about that because everybody who is registered, I will send a copy of the recording. And so just make sure, well, anyone who's here and listening to this knows that I'll be getting a recording, but also if you know people who are interested, just tell them to register and I'll send the link in about a week. We welcome your questions. This is hopefully interactive. And it's easier for me and for us if you use the Q&A feature. So if you toggle your mouse over your bar, you should see an option where there's two little squares together. And it's actually, I think they may have changed it, but look for the one that says Q&A. And if you can put your questions in there rather than the chat, that will be helpful because if several people ask the same question, I can see it much more easily in the Q&A than I can in following threads in the chat. You can also ask a question anonymously with that. There's a little checkbox on it, and you can ask an anonymous question. So we actually have a panel of presenters today, but I'm going to introduce just briefly. So the first is Lacey Bellinger. She works with stakeholders to create new and updated crop profiles and pest management strategic plans for the National IPM database. And she is based in North Carolina State University at the Southern IPM Center. And Dr. Lorena Lopez is Extension Assistant Professor in the Department of Entomology and Plant Pathology at North Carolina State. And she recently completed a strawberry PMSP in the Southern region. Welcome. Hannah Penn works for USDA ARS. She's a research entomologist. And she recently completed a sugarcane PMSP in the South. Kater Hake with Cotton Incorporated. He's Vice President of Agricultural and Environmental Research, and he recently completed a PMSP on cotton. And Lene Jess is the co-director and working group liaison for the North Central IPM Center and has been involved in many PMSPs and crop profiles over her career. And so we're delighted to have all of you here. And by way of introduction, a little bit about why we're doing this webinar is other regions in the U.S. People are participating and doing PMSPs and crop profiles, and for some reason there are few people in the Northeast that are doing PMSPs. I think our last ones, they last for 5 years, and I think we actually don't have any that have been that are still relevant. And actually, that's none true. There might be a couple. And so we wanted to have this webinar to answer your questions and explain to you about PMSPs, how they're used by other regions, how other regions are doing them, and so that you can translate it into your work and what you do, and see if it might be a fit for you because as of today, there is some money available for doing these, and so Lacey very kindly offered to talk through and give some background, and then we have our other participants can share with you their experience. So please feel free to dive in and ask questions, and hopefully this will give you a much better background. Before we jump in, we have some questions for you, and there should be a poll. There we go, that pops up. If you don't see a poll pop up on your device, don't worry about it. Sometimes some devices don't work when Zoom changes things, and I'll just be quiet for a couple of minutes so you can complete that. All right, I think that's enough. I am going to share the results. There we go. So just so folks can see, we have a couple of people who are very knowledgeable, but a good smattering of not knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, moderately about PMSPs. How knowledgeable are you about how to develop? 50% not knowledgeable at all, and another 26% are somewhat knowledgeable. So 75% of the people on this call are saying they don't feel comfortable at all knowing how they would go about developing it. About how you would use a PMSP, we have another 75% who are not at all or only somewhat knowledgeable. So same thing, not quite sure how you would use it if you knew how to develop one. So hopefully we can answer that question. And how familiar are you with the IPM database? Same thing, we have 72% of people there who are not at all or only somewhat familiar. So hopefully that will help the presenters today and give some guidance for them in speaking with you. All right, so with that, we will move ahead, and I am managing the slides. So Lacey, when you want me to move ahead, just let me know and I'll click forward.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you guys for all joining today to learn a little bit more about these IPM documents that are, in what I find extremely useful, particularly because it's my entire role at the Southern IPM Center to help create, facilitate, and manage the creation of these IPM documents and how they are in the National IPM database. And so one of the first things I would like to cover is the difference between a pest management strategic plan, or PMSP, and what we call in the South crop profiles. I think they've also been called in your region production profiles, just to the different climate of agriculture and industries that you guys find yourselves in. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a really good kind of visual document on what the difference is. So everything on the left side of your screen in that gray text box are things that are included in a crop profile. And then everything on the right side of the screen are things that are additional to the crop profile that are included in the PMSP. And I've asterished some of the really important parts just to tell you some of the main differences. But what we find in the South is that crop profiles are typically done by maybe emerging crops or crops that don't have a lot of research or support, and they just want to get a basis. It's also done on a state by state level, where our PMSPs can cover a larger region. And those are typically done with crops that have a lot of research. They may have had one done in the past, or they have a lot of stakeholder inputs so they can fill out those kind of points. Some of those really key important pieces that are necessary within these documents are worker activities, production practices, production facts, production counties, are really important for both documents. And then with the PMSPs, it's really important to have the priority set. Those are priorities that are grower driven priorities that we in the South identify at a workshop meeting with growers. And they are regulatory, research, and education driven. And those are to help the usability of the document and to just kind of pinpoint in time how that document was affecting, or sorry, chronologically documenting where that industry was at that point in time and what they found necessary. And then another big portion of that is efficacy. So efficacy of current chemistries and other production management practices for the industry. Those, it seems a little weird. You might be like, oh, our extension guidelines say this efficacy is this or such and such. But what we do in ours is that we take the efficacy and we write down, what most people find their general efficacy is, and then documenting why maybe one control method is used more than the other, whether that be cost, availability, or preference over why they're using something over the other. And that's really good for demonstrating to regulators. They might have the idea that this industry has all these possibilities for management, but they actually don't know that the industry actually has a very slim amount of those, and they only are able to use those for X and Y reasons. And then that kind of ties right in with timelines that are documented for production practices, your pests, growth stages, and chemicals used, as well as worker activities to kind of see when workers are in the field and when those chemistries would be applied to see if you have any exposure. But it also allows for those nuanced cases of pesticides are applied by drones or aerial application, or irrigation work is done, on the outskirts of the field and pesticide applications are going on in the middle. Just really allows you to expand on those. So I just wanted to kind of go over that really quickly to see that, one is different than the other and they can be used in different ways. I did also just want to point out that a crop profile doesn't necessarily have to be a crop. That's what we just call it down in the South, but they can be a school system. So you can have urban IPM for one of those. You can do it in livestock. So it doesn't just have to be a crop. It just happens that a majority of them are crops, but there's a way to work with them to have them apply to many different areas. Both of those kinds of documents are housed in the National IPM database, and I have the link there. I'm sure we can send out the link afterwards for those who would like to peruse it. But if you just Google National IPM database, it should be one of the first links. And that was the homepage that we just saw. And when you click on the right part with the search button, you'll be shown this screen, and you're able to search through the database to see previous PMSPs, crop profiles, and some other kinds of IPM documents that we have in the database. All the newer documents we're inputting directly into the database, so they'll be a little bit more searchable. They're now all previous ones from the last couple years are searchable by PDF. So you have to dig a little bit more, but we're slowly doing all new documents in, so it's a little bit easier to pull up any information that you're looking for. And you'll be able to search the cotton PMSP that Cater completed, the strawberry PMSP that Lorena completed, and hopefully in the fall, the sugarcane PMSP that we will have done, because we have a PMSP workshop for that in July. So that's really exciting. And we can go on to the next one. Yes. So what really is a PMSP and why it's important? PMSPs, they are meant to address specific challenges for a crop, commodity, really an industry, and we're pest focused. They highlight the priorities, like I talked about before, of research, education, and regulatory support for that industry at that moment in time. And then regulatories typically use these documents as a tool to make regulatory decisions within the industry. It's really hard for regulators to know every crop ever grown for the small amount of people that are within that department. So they use these documents to help, as a quick reference, along with, extension manuals and other information to help make those decisions. And it's a really great opportunity for the industry to talk with regulators and researchers during that time to discuss those important issues they have going on with their industry. And then they can also be used to apply for grants. So if you have your PMSP and it says something like, we really need new control strategies for this pest, then that can be documented later when applying for a grant that this meeting happened and these growers said that they need new control strategies. So we would like to apply for a grant based on that. It just really helps add to that kind of portfolio. You can outline, again, like I said, current industry regulatory compliance efforts, like those that might be coming out with the Endangered Species Act. And you have all those herbicide and insecticide mitigation efforts. So you can go ahead and type within that document your current mitigation practices, and then identify those successes and gaps that people have with their pest management. So you can, again, like I said, with the chemistries is again just a great example. You can identify where maybe something is working, isn't working, and why. Just really expansive on that. Typically, the regulatory agencies that we work with in the South are the USDA, OPMP, EPA, and then we also work quite a bit with IR4 for some of those specialty crops. And I think we can move on. Yes. So just a overview of the process. It is a slightly longer, more detailed, but this is just your general overview. And this is again how we do it in the South. We would assemble a group of stakeholders to draft a document. We would organize a stakeholder meeting, and it's very key that it's highly grower attended to identify a lot of those questions like efficacy and priorities. And that's done during the meeting, and that meeting typically takes all day. And then we would compile all that information into a draft document. We have multiple reviews of it, and then it gets published. And it can either be published in a journal if you wish to take your document and do that, or it can be just published on the National IPM database. And then just these documents are typically led by what we call a project lead or leads. And I just kind of typed out some of the things that would make a really good project lead, or if you're like, I don't know if I should do it, or if I can, or you might know somebody who has these qualities or might be able to do it. So you want someone who is able to be responsible for all those checklist items and deadlines, such as getting drafts out, scheduling logistics for that meeting, sending out invites, things like that. Would help write, or organize a team to write that background information. Would help, again, coordinate that workshop meeting with growers and other stakeholders, and would be responsible for the finalized draft document. So the last person to say, yes, Lacey, this is great, or yes, Yana, this is great. We're ready to post. And then ideally that project lead would have great grower connections. And that's really key because if you can't get growers to the meeting, the workshop, then your PMSP is mostly dead because you didn't have grower input. And then really big, just being passionate about your industry. Maybe you don't know a lot of growers, but if you want to know a lot of growers and you have that attitude and that want and that need, that can kind of really outpace a lot of things. And then I have any questions so far?
There are no questions so far, no. So I think we should probably move ahead with what we were thinking, because we're going to answer questions that people may be rattling in their minds and haven't asked yet. So do we want to move
Certainly.
ahead?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Yana lovely introduced our guest. I'm going to go ahead and have Lene speak. Lene is from the North Central region. She helps facilitate our PMSPs in the South, and she has so much experience on this topic. So I'd really like her to kind of describe her experience.
Thank you, Lacey. Yeah, I've been working on these with the Office of Pest Management Policy since they started in 1998. So we've seen a lot of changes since then. Yana asked me to kind of go through how I think these have been used a little bit. Lacey covered some of them. One of the things that I hear from the commodity groups, and like she said, it can be things besides crops, but most of them are commodities, is it's a document with everything in one place. So sometimes commodity associations will get calls and say, hey, well, how is your crop grown and what's going on? And they actually have all that information in there. There's economic data, there's where it's grown, and then all the pests and controls and things like that. So it's a nice document with everything in one place. Lacey talked about how we do priorities. We do regulatory research and educational priorities. And like she said, these are really useful for researchers when they're writing grants, because they can say, hey, this is one of the top priorities for the commodity. Reviewers really like to see that information. Is this really helpful for EPA? A lot of times they will join us if they can, and they ask questions along the way. And it's not ever a case of that EPA is saying, oh, I think you're using that wrong or anything like that. It's for them to learn, like Lacey said, they can't know how every crop is grown. It's for them to learn why growers are doing what they're doing. A lot of times they'll say, well, you have like 4 pesticide choices, and the growers will say, well, 3 of them are so expensive we can't use them, or they don't work on my soil type, or I'd have to use more than the labeled rate to control the pests, or we're getting resistance. And those are the things that EPA needs to know, so we still have tools in our toolbox to control the pests in those crops. It's also used by extension educators. A lot of times the growers will ask them, what do they need? Sometimes they need a bulletin, sometimes they need training for scouting for new invasive species. They may need more training on the Endangered Species Act, things like that. So those all come up in the meeting. We've had a couple groups that have really taken these documents and gone to their national legislators. Whenever they do a new PMSP and they update it, they'll actually take the document and go and talk to those legislators and say, look, this is where our crop is at. This is where we need help. Please help us with any legislation that you can. And it's also used, like Lacey said, with IR4 in their food use workshop for their priority setting. So if it comes up that there is a crop that we're doing a PMSP on, and there's something that's kind of in the pipeline, one of the pesticides hasn't quite made it yet, or there's some holdup. Usually if it's in a PMSP, it'll get an A priority, which means that it'll probably get into the system. Researchers can then look at the efficacy of it, make sure it's working, that kind of thing. So it kind of gives that a push that it might need to actually get registered. I think that's what I had. Is there anything else you wanted me to cover, Lacey? These have changed a lot. Like she said, we have a lot of settings. We have a rights of way pest management strategic plan that isn't a crop. It's a whole different setting. We have school ones, a lot of different ones. So there's possibilities to do them. I see somebody just asked if there's one done for hemp. We have not done one for hemp, but we're trying to get a national one going. Previously, we couldn't do them in hemp because it was illegal at a national level. Now they're saying, okay, it's legal enough that we can at least look at it as hemp for the commodity part of it. So we're trying to do that right now.
That was great. Pretty much everything that I love that you restate and able to share on that. There hasn't been a PMSP done for hemp. There is interest in doing a PMSP. There is a crop profile done on hemp, I believe, in New York. Yes, New York, that was done in 2023, I believe. But there is a need. There's a group of people who would like to do a national hemp PMSP.
And Lacey, I see that somebody asked about how we incorporate state pesticide control rules, and that is brought up. So if there's something that's different in one state over another, either it be state regulations or even soil types. So a pesticide may work really well on mineral soils, but not on organic soils. Those are all noted in the document so that EPA can see that and anybody else, any regulators can see that. A lot of times we will ask state regulators to either join us or review the document if they can to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Perfect. Yeah. I think, yeah, it was great. I then have Cater Haig, Lorena Lopez, and Hannah Penn each have done or are doing PMSPs in the South. And I thought they would be really great to answer some of these frequently asked questions. So, Cater, if you don't mind answering, how did you go about writing such a long document in one day?
So I had worked for the cotton industry for 45 years and actually had retired for 2 years from Cotton Incorporated, and Dr. Ryan Kurtz now leads that effort. So I had extensive contacts and I knew most of the researchers working on cotton, and I actually had the time. And the first one we did, I had worked extensively in that region. So it was not an easy document to write, but I didn't have a whole lot of historical guidance. The previous one had been 20 years done previously, but the team in the Southern IPM Center, we got together multiple times in person and just talked about how it should be structured and how it should be laid out. And we came up with a model that I think was really useful in that we designed it so individual chapters or components are designed to be standalone. So it's not a document that anyone's going to read from beginning to end sitting down. It's not a novel. It's designed to be as a resource. So it was really written in very distinct chunks. And also I was extremely lucky in getting some of the key extension scientists to help take on responsibility for various disciplines as well. So it was parsed out and it was cut up and tried standalone individual components. So it really wasn't too bad.
Yeah. So I think that question that I've gotten a lot about how it's all written in one day stems to how PMSPs used to be done. I wasn't around in that time, thankfully, because it sounds I don't understand how they did it. It was all must have been amazing. But they used to have it to where they would have a PMSP workshop with stakeholders, and they would write the document then or after. And sometimes it would get finished, and sometimes it wouldn't. Here, or at least within the southern region, we create a draft document with as much information as we can possibly get. Then we have the workshop, and then afterwards, there's a couple little draft things done, and it's finalized after that. So I think a lot of that question is like, how is it done in one day? For us, it's not. It takes a couple months. Lorena, do you mind going over how you did your writing process for the strawberry PMSP?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. So to follow up Cater, so yes, for us, it was different. For me, I put together a draft first based on the older one we have for strawberries, the ones for 2000. That one didn't include Georgia. So we included Georgia from all the way from Virginia to Florida. And I started going through it and taking out all the things that were out of date. Like, for example, all the methyl bromide usage that was taken out. And then I used all the references that we have about when are strawberries planted usually, or the recommendations that we have from the guides. So we have IPM guides for strawberries and all that stuff. So I use it to complement it. I try to group the states that had similarities. So for example, from Virginia to Georgia, the practices were really similar. And then there was Florida, which was completely different. So I try to group those 4 states, and then I did an entire line, separate line for Florida. And that was for all the different sections. So Katie already mentioned that each of those sections are standalone. I did the same, but I try to, within those sections, to try to group based on those similarities and those really high differences. And then we went to the sessions. Mine was particularly long because we have 2 sessions. We wanted to grasp all the information that we can from these smaller producer of strawberries, and then we have one with Florida and Georgia. So it was 2 long workshop sessions, and it was really helpful to have a moderator with you. So Linnea was my moderator at the time, and she was great. It was so much helpful because it's a long day, talking to growers all day. So we will take shifts, and even if it's not a person that is as experienced as Linnea, having another person so you can shift and kind of thinking about, okay, we should ask about this, we should follow up on this, is really helpful. And then after we collected all the data, we went through that data, and then I started modifying, okay, so this is what the recommendation says, but now I wanna put in this PMSP, I wanna put what the growers are doing. So I modified based on that. That way, when we're gonna use it, the way I would like it to be used is, okay, so this is what we're recommending based on our research as a specialist, and this is what the growers are doing. So where are the gaps there? Where are the focus that we need to work on in terms of education, research, regulatory, all those different things? So that was kind of the focus from the beginning that I took on that PMSP for strawberries.
Thank you so much, Lorena. I really like that you pointed out too that it's there's a difference between what an extension guideline says and what growers are doing. and you can make all the extension recommendations that you want, and you can put out so many guides and fact sheets. But if that's not applicable and for applied research and in field what's going on, because you're in field, your growers are experiencing some different field conditions than what's happening at the research station, you're going to get some different management practices, and being able to highlight those and really pinpoint those challenges is key. Now, Hannah is in the document writing phase, and she has a little bit different of a twist. Hannah, would you like to talk about how you're writing your document?
Yeah, so we have a little bit less of a centralized process. So we're also only doing one state. So Louisiana and Florida are the only two sugarcane growing states, and the production in both states is really different. So we're focusing just on Louisiana sugarcane. And we already have a really close relationship between our land grant university system and the USDA ARS station where I work, as well as our stakeholder group. And so kind of at the get-go, we've been working with Lacey's help. So we started with our previous crop profile, which I think is about 10 to 14 years old at this point, to fill in that document that Cater was talking about with what we previously had. But then we've broken it up into, okay, here's our entomology section, disease, weeds, and have separate groups working on that with a point person for each group. And then we have meetings once a month virtually to kind of come together and make sure that that document is moving forward. And right now we're actually implementing a survey to kind of get at those grower and ag consultant priorities to see how well they're matching up before the workshop. So right now we're in the middle of winter extension season. So we have a QR code, and that's going to go in our commodity group, our local bulletin. So hopefully we can get some more grower eyes on that. So a little bit different of a process, and I think a little bit more hands-on by more people. But because our commodity is already so integrated across all of our different research groups and stakeholders, we were easily able to do that.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I like that you pointed out there that we have that survey going on. So in the Southern Center, we implemented this pre-workshop survey kind of thing to see where growers are at and what they're doing. And it really helps structure what questions we ask during the workshop and how much time we allot per discipline. So if we have a lot of weeds to go through and they only have 5 insects, which would be amazing if only one industry had like 5 insect pests, we can allot time that way. And I think, Lorena, you have your hand up to add something.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make one more comment based on Hannah's mentioning on how she's dealing with her PMSB. And it was very different for me, but I want to highlight that I also had a lot of collaborators that helped me through it. Like, it was different for me because I put the draft first, send them to them, and then they helped me go through all of them. Then I got it back. I went through the sessions, organized it again, and then I sent it back to them. And all of them, well, at least one per state on each of these disciplines helped me go through it, because otherwise it would have been a lot for just one person.
I think that leads to another really frequently asked question is how do you organize that many stakeholders for a document? And Cater, I would love to hear you and how you did this because we have a lot of stakeholders in cotton. So how did you organize your different stakeholders?
Lacey, you're absolutely correct. Cotton's problem is there was too much data. It had too much expertise. And so similar to what Lorena said, we used a multifaceted approach. We had some people that just wanted to take the lead on it. So the pathology section, Dr. Terry Wheeler wrote that initially, and I just had total confidence with her expertise. But sections such as weeds, there was a lot of people that wanted to contribute, but they didn't want to take the primary task of writing it. So similar to what Lorena said, I wrote the weed section, even though I'm not a weed scientist, and they just slaughtered it with red ink over multiple reviews, and so that worked out really well. So it was, and plus, as it's been mentioned a couple times, at the workshop, we had good attendance by extension, and several of these people stepped forward and raised their hand, and I relied on them heavily afterwards to review and update, and we went back and forth. Dr. David Kearns, who's a statewide IPM specialist and a regional IPM specialist. We went back and forth on reviews with regards to insect pest management. So it was really a different strategies for different disciplines.
Great. Lorena, we had quite a few different kinds of stakeholders, especially with having two different PMSP workshops. How did you find it with organizing your different stakeholders?
So it was hard to get them to take the initiative in my case. So I honestly, every time I saw them, I was like, we're doing this PMSP and we have all these data. So I will get them really excited every time I see them. I don't know if they got tired of me or not, but when I send the draft, at least one of them per state and one of them per discipline were able to jump on it and were willing to do so. So I will have a list of each of the people or the collaborators that are reached out per discipline and per state. And I will say, okay, these are the things that we have per state. I will share them with them. And these are the things we're missing. So we're missing a lot of things in weeds. We're missing a lot of few things here in plant pathology. I'm covering this part here. So can you help me with these and these and that? I did that specifically before the sessions. After the sessions, I just let them to take the lead on what they thought was missing or what they thought they could add based on the session. Some of them were able to attend, most of them were able to attend, even if it was via Zoom. So that was the way how I organized it the most.
And then Hannah, we're in that process kind of right now. We've done it a little bit beforehand, but how would you mind speaking a little bit on your experience with us organizing stakeholders for the sugarcane?
So yeah, we've had the one point person in terms of the researchers for each different group. But then we've also been in contact with our commodity group, so the American Sugarcane League, and they've been really critical about helping us reach other people, as well as the Louisiana Ag Consultants Group have kind of been our two big promoters to get our stuff out there on a bigger scale.
I've found it really engaging when we partner with grower associations, and that's been really true for our rice PMSP that we did and in cotton as well. But if you know or are able to get contacts within that specific commodity or industries association, they're very, very helpful with being able to reach out to producers and then also attend and provide their input and their feedback. Because a lot of times they, represent a large group of growers. Same with having consultants attend. If you're not able to get all your producers there, our consultants, they're on the farms there as well, and they're the ones making the recommendations that the farmers are listening to, so they're good to have in person. And then we're gonna start back around with my one final question for everyone. But Cater,
actually, can we just bring Lene into that question, see if she has anything else to add?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, Lene.
Oh, that's okay. I think what everybody has said is pretty much what happens. A lot of times it starts with a commodity group. I was just thinking about the ginseng commodity group. They update theirs every 3 years. And they're pretty adamant about that it's very important for them to do that. And so they're the ones that go to the researchers then and say, okay, let's have this meeting again. We need to update it. And if you do it every 3 years, it's a lot easier because people kind of know what's going on and that type of thing. But sometimes, yes, it's a commodity organization that takes the lead. Sometimes it's educators, researchers, extension people, whatever at universities will say, hey, we need more information. We need to pull people together. I think they see the need of where it can help, like with EPA, getting that information across, that kind of thing. So every group does it a little bit differently. Sometimes it's one person who takes it on themselves. Other times it's multiple people. And we have in the past, at least in the North Central region, Lacey, you were mentioning, we usually have a draft document ahead of time. And then we give that to the growers ahead of time and at the meeting, so they can kind of follow along, see where we're going, see what's in there, and see already beforehand if we forgot a pest or whatever, we did a control measure, that kind of thing. So that's been helpful too.
Thank you so much, Lene. My last question, for my helpful attendees, what are you using or what can this document be used for, Cater?
Well, the utility, Lacey, you talked about it really strongly in the beginning, is that what's unique about the PMSP is the grower input. It's been mentioned a couple times, things like the diversity of pesticides that growers select are often for reasons that academics don't appreciate, such as the cost or availability, or even growers are concerned about having multiple suppliers and bundling, as we all know that seed and crop protection chemicals are often bundled. So getting the growers there, and we've talked about the commodity organizations, that role in getting key growers that are willing to speak up and really digging into how these products are used and why they're used in certain ways. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, I'll throw out, is that with cotton, we've tried really hard to grab the innovations that growers are developing and installing on their farm to mitigate adverse effects of pesticides or reduce their use or target them better. So innovation is a big part, and I love the fact that ginseng's done every 3 years. That would make it a lot easier to have that.
Lorena, would you like to give on how you spoke about how you're how you want to see the document used, but do you have anything else to add to that point?
Sure, that would be one of the main ways that I would like it to be used, because sometimes we're doing research and we see things in the field on our research stations that we think is what's happening out there, and it's not necessarily what the growers are following. So having that way of comparison, I think, is very important. The other way is the more traditional one, that is the one that we extension agents and also specialists like us use, and it's for grant funding. So it's mentioning, okay, these are the priorities that we have identified with the growers, and we need to work on this. We need something, we need funding to do this. I think that is the most important one, because it will allow us to close that gap. And also regulatory, I haven't used it that way, but the way Linnea mentioned, I think it is important, and some of the USDA people has shown interest on being on top of these documents and seeing what's going on with the growers in multiple crops. So that's also an important one.
Great, thank you so much. And then Hannah, how do you expect to use the sugarcane document?
So I think we have 3 big ones. One that has already kind of come up is looking at the difference in research priorities versus like what the extension personnel and researchers think is a really big issue and an emerging issue, and then what the growers know about. So really capitalizing on that and using this as a way to start that conversation with growers and researchers. The other thing is we're a weird crop in that we kind of fall between row crop and specialty crop. So we're not considered a specialty crop, but a lot of our production practices kind of tend that way. And so in terms of both grant funding and getting products registered for use, we fall through a lot of gaps. And so we really want to rely on this document pretty heavily for both funding and regulatory purposes, because we're kind of a really unique system in that regard. And then the final thing is we have growers that are switching into our crop for the first time. So our crop is moving more west and north in Louisiana. And so we have people that used to just grow rice or just soybeans and corn, and they're coming into sugarcane brand new. And a lot of our sugarcane farmers that have been in it for generations, they've had a culture of IPM that's been really well established. But a lot of the new growers coming from other crops that locally don't necessarily have that culture for IPM in their fields, they're coming at it with a blank slate. We want to give them a tool where they could just be like, okay, these are the tools and the things we need to be concerned about in this crop, the hurdles that we have, and some ways to overcome them.
Thank you so much. Linnea?
Yeah, so Hannah, you just kind of brought up another thing that I think it's really important of these meetings is that people learn so much from each other. Growers are learning from other growers, but also the consultants and researchers, because it's always like, has anybody seen this pest for the last 3 years? And maybe a majority say no, but somebody says, yeah, it's gotten even worse for us. And I think it's just learning how things are in different areas, learning what tools other growers are using. I think it's been helpful that way too, just to kind of see the broader picture of the whole commodity.
So just to kind of review some of those frequently asked questions, the document's not written in one day. It takes a little bit. We typically kind of do like a 6 to 9 months out from whenever that workshop's going to be to just start. That way, one, our project leads can have work their normal job, and then also spend some time on the draft document, and then a couple months after the PMSP. So it's not all written in one day. Organizing different stakeholders, it's really about like knowing who is in the industry, and if you don't know someone in this industry, being able to find that person. And then we kind of talked about all the different ways that these documents are used, whether it's to educate their fellow extension people, to let other growers know what's going on, the regulatory side, being able to compile all that information into one document is just fantastic. And then I had some commonly asked concerns, I guess. Yes. So and so told me this process when they did it was a large endeavor, and I'm finding it daunting to be responsible for that amount of work. Well, one, when did so and so do this document? Was it before, whenever they were doing the document during like a 2-day workshop, and then afterwards it was that one person's responsibility to get it out? Or is it the way that the Southern Center's doing it, where we have like a long draft process, a PMSP workshop, and then drafting out? I don't think I've done one PMSP since being at the Southern region where it's one person responsible for everything. We have a lead, or we have leads. So Cater's acting as a lead, Lorena acted as a lead. I would say Hannah works as a leads person because she's been working heavily with her other counterparts down in Louisiana. So it's a team effort. Not one person is responsible. And at the end of the day, if you reach out to your IPM centers or your IPM state IPM coordinators, I'm sure they would be really helpful to be able to connect you with people who would be wanting to provide input on that. And then sharing information that might encroach on trade secrets seems like a no-go for stakeholders. I don't think that's ever came up as an issue for our PMSPs. We're not really discussing trade secrets. It's more so what's going on and what you would tell anybody who came onto your production area of what's going on. It's more so a voice to voice a grower concerns and issues, and then successes that they're having within their industry, and document that. Lene, I don't know if you have any input on that trade secret one, because that's not something I've ran into.
I've never run into it either.
So if it is a concern, it can be discussed with your team beforehand on how to maybe address that or word something. And then sharing pest management practice with regulators might be a turnoff for some participating. This is something that I've actually been amazingly and incredibly grateful for our USDA OPMP collaborators and our EPA stakeholders whenever they attend the workshop. They are there to listen, and they state that in their introduction at the very beginning, and they ask really good questions. They want to know what's going on in the field, so whenever they're helping make decisions, they know where to go. They're not there to like slap people's hands. They're there to know that whenever they make a regulatory decision and it's affecting growers, how it's affecting growers, and maybe what the workaround might be. I've never had a bad experience with having them attend. In fact, a lot of growers are so excited and they want to keep talking, and we get into a 15-30-minute conversation with our regulators on Zoom and growers in person. So it's never been hard for the PMSPs. Cater, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about having EPA and USDA in on our cotton PMSP.
Just briefly, we did have good attendance at the workshop from the regulatory scientists, and Cotton has a long history of working closely with them, so very interactive on the science. So I saw that as an extremely strong positive, and the growers show up because they want to communicate with the regulatory scientists. So that's a real positive part of the workshops.
Thank you. I think those were all my common concerns. Yana, did we have any questions?
Lacey, may I make a mention about the two last concerns? That's
Sure.
okay?
Yeah.
So I've actually heard some of the growers before that asking about who's gonna be there, who are we going to be talking, who's gonna be the audience, and I actually kind of sense at the beginnings of each of our two sections for strawberries that they were a little bit reluctant to sharing some information. Basically because some growers were neighbors. And it's like, oh, maybe this guy has that pest there, or these guys using these products, or if a grower doesn't want to share something, it's not going to share. So they should be fine on that. But they were kind of reluctant who's going to share, how much are they going to share. But after a while, they're warm up and they started sharing and they started talking, oh, are you doing that too? Because I tried that and that didn't work for me, or that worked really well. So, and it was the same thing on both of the sessions. And after each of the sessions, I got a few growers that were coming up to me and saying, this is great. I love hearing about other growers are doing. So what they were sharing, it was useful for their peers, even though they got some time, they needed some time to get there and start sharing their practices. So
I think Lene can attest to it takes some warming up. She thankfully does a really amazing job with the Southern PMSPs on getting people warmed up to share what's going on. But Yana, was there any questions from the Q&A?
No, there aren't any questions. It's probably because you've done such a good job. Kind of answered all their questions.
I try. I'm really passionate about these. I think they're really useful. And I think if you're thinking, man, I work in an industry where I'm not quite sure where I can see myself doing that, reach out either to the Northeastern IPM or feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to talk through your ideas with you on how to create some of these documents. Maybe you're working with cattle. We have cattle PMSPs. Maybe you're working with hemp. You know, that's something that I can connect you with other people who want to do a hemp PMSP. They're really amazing documents to work on. I get to meet so many unique people, especially at the Cotton one. I think I was laughing the entire time with the crowd there. At the Strawberry PMSP, I learned about a really unique form of integrated pest management. And if anybody's familiar with the little flappy guys that are at like car lots for selling car lots, a grower was saying that he puts those up to ward off birds in his strawberry fields. So you really learn a lot. Another person said they put peanut butter on like their electric wires so the deer will lick it, get shocked, and not eat their strawberries. You really learn a lot. And I did in the strawberry one while I was taking notes, I put that the flappy guys were IPM practices. So you really learn a lot. They're amazing documents to work on. And if you have any questions, you know, I'm happy to answer them. I'm passionate about them, and I'd like other people to be as well.
Great. And I'm conscious of the time. It's 11:56, and I know a lot of people will probably leave us at the top of the hour. So I'm going to slip through a couple of things, if I can. Let's go. We have a couple of poll questions for us to gauge how helpful this was for people, or what people feel that they've learned. And while you were filling that out, I'm going to continue because we have 3 minutes till the end. We have some upcoming webinars, one on risk forecasting evaluation using the Newer platform and AgRadar platform. And mangled that title there. And that's coming up next week, February 18th, with Dan Olmsted and Glenn Kohler. And then one in April, exploring alternatives to neonic seed treatments, case studies in vegetable crops, and that's by Leo Segaldo. He's based up in Geneva, Cornell University, and he was an IPM award winner. So those are coming up. This is particularly relevant on this webinar. We have a way of finding your colleagues. So there is a link here that you can put a profile up about yourself. So if you're really interested in hemp, you can, or ginseng, you can put a profile up. Other people can find you. And then we also have a Find a Colleague site where you can go there and you can find all the people in the Northeast who are interested in strawberries, or all the people who are interested in ginseng or hemp. So it's a really great way of connecting with people who have similar interests. And as I mentioned, there is a recording of this, and I will email you a link probably sometime next week. And I will share the results of the, let me hold on a second. I have to stop that one to do that one to do that one. There we go. All right. So so you can see here that how knowledgeable are people? It's moved into somewhat, moderately, and very. As a result of this webinar, how knowledgeable are you about how to develop a PMSP? That also has shifted. And then as a result of this webinar, how knowledgeable are you about how to use it? And that has also shifted. So, and how familiar are you with the IPM database? That has also shifted. So, and how familiar are the difference between PMSPs and crop profiles? That has also changed. So I want to, and actually I'm just looking here as a result of this webinar, how interested are you in developing one? And we have, let's see, we have 8, probably about close to 20 people who are interested in developing a PMSP. So yay, presenters. For sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your knowledge, so that people in the Northeast have a much better idea of what these things are and how they might go about doing it. And I want to say, if you are in the Northeast, you are interested in developing this, we actually don't have an RFP out at the moment for it. We have had it in the past and we didn't get much of a response, which is why we're doing this webinar. If you are one of those 15, 20-ish people who are interested, feel free to send an email to our director, Deb Grantham, and I, and we can kind of gauge the interest, and we'll take it from there. And so with that, I want to say thank you very, very much to Lacey for putting all of this together for us. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you to Lorena and Kater and Hannah and Lene for the multiple hours of experience that have gone into you being able to share with us your experiences. And thank you for taking the time. Everyone is busy, and I know that, and I appreciate an hour of your time to share with us. So, and there is one other question, which I think what I'm going to do with that is I'll email it to the group, and maybe someone can type up an answer. We could stick it in with the recording. So thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. And for those of you who are in cold places, stay warm, and thank you very much. All right, bye-bye.